I'm excited to have my next guest on, Charles. He's a very experienced finance man. But before we go into his bio, who he is and what he's going to offer, today we're going to talk a little bit about payroll. We're going to talk about small business finances. We're going to talk about the things that you need to know to keep the IRS out of your bank and out of your pocket, and to make sure that you are set up for success from a payroll standpoint and any other tax strategies that we might be able to go over today, that oftentimes small business owners and entrepreneurs don't really know or don't understand. And Charles is the guy to do that. But before we do that, just a reminder that we have a new business resources page on our website. So go to www.thecommonsensepodcast.com/resources, and you'll be taken to the business resources page. And then you'll be able to find my favorite library books. You'll be able to also see resources that you can use to start your business, like how to set up a website and get signage for your business. It's all right there. I put it all there for you to enjoy, and to even make sure that you're starting off on the right page, or even augmenting services that you need. But before we go into our conversation, I'm Micah Logan. This is The Common Sense Show.
You're listening to The Common Sense Show. If you've just started a new business, or if you're just thinking about it, this podcast is for you. Micah Logan has a stellar track record coaching small businesses to achieve six-figure revenue streams. The advice on this show is what has allowed him to have over 15 years of experience as an entrepreneur. Here is your host, Micah Logan.
All right, as I mentioned in the open, we have Charles Reid here. I'm just going to give you a little bit of an introduction. I could go on for days, but we had to distill this into just a few sentences. Charles Reid is he's a public certified public accountant. He's a U.S. tax court practitioner. He's a member of the Internal Revenue Service Advisory Council, so you should be his friend, and the founder of Get Payroll. Mr. Reid's companies have provided full-service payroll services, payroll tax services, and other payroll-related services since 1991. He is an accomplished senior executive and entrepreneur with more than 50 years of financial leadership experience in a broad range of industries, and the author of 4 books. His latest book, we're going to talk about today, The Payroll Book, A Guide for Small Businesses and Startups, is currently number 25 in Small Business Books section on Amazon. Charles, welcome to the show.
Micah, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for having me.
So we could go down many rabbit holes when it comes to everything that you have the expertise in. I must ask the most curious question for me, which is, what is the Internal Revenue Service Advisory Council, and why should we be your friends when it comes to that?
It is a FACA council. It is a federal advisory council set up by Congress a number of years ago. It's about 20 people. We serve a 3-year period, and a third rolls off every year. And we work with the Internal Revenue Service to provide them a real life point of view. The IRS is very insular. They live within their own bubble. They're not in business. They don't file business tax returns. They don't deal with the real world like you and I do. Mm-hmm. And so we're drawn CPAs, attorneys, EAs, people that are associated with taxes come in, and we go through problems they have. We suggest things for them. We review new forms. We do all kinds of things to help them be better with business and get rid of some of that insulated mindset that they have. What's nice is the new commissioner, Chuck Reddick, has been there about 3 years now, used to be on ERSAC years ago and is very high on it. So he pushes it, as a number of other people do, because they realize how insulated they are from the real life. So Chuck is always there when we open the year and sees us at the end and talks with us and takes comments. I had lunch with him a couple of times up in the cafeteria. So it was a very good experience. Got me a lot of contacts in the IRS.
Right.
Okay. Which I've been able to use to help my clients. Sure. So, and it also has given me a much better understanding of their mindset, mm-hmm. where they come from, how they view the world, and therefore I'm better able to interact with the IRS officials than I was before.
It's interesting because every small business owner or entrepreneur is trying to figure out how does the IRS interact. Everyone, especially during tax season, the first thing that small businesses think is, am I going to get audited this year? Every single year. You could be in business for 30 years and you're just like, the audit it's like the sword of Damocles hanging over your head every year. Even if you're not going to get audited, and the statistical probability of you getting audited is ridiculously low. Everyone feels like they're going to pick you out of the stack of hay and get audited. Let's talk about that for a second, because this is something that's not often talked about. We know what an audit is when basically when the IRS raises your hand because there's a red flag that went off, and they take a closer look. But is it something that people should be deathly afraid of when it happens?
No. First of all, audit doesn't mean you owe. Audit means you've been selected. Okay? That's the first thing. Many times you're selected almost at random. Now, if you have a red flag, yeah. But if you don't, you may just have been selected at random, and they do that. Otherwise, they don't have any statistical norm to set against their red flags. That's how they develop the red flags as well. So if you follow the rules, you don't have anything to worry about. Literally, you don't. A lot of audits are no change. Mm-hmm. Some audits you'll get a refund. The first audit I did was for my father's business many years ago. Mm-hmm. And he'd set aside $2,000 for the audit. And I was a CPA. I met with the examiner and we went through the whole things. And I came back to my father and he said, do you want the good news or the bad news? And he said, give me the bad news. I says, it's only $400. He says, if that's the bad news, what's the good news? I said, it's a refund. He bought dinner.
You gave that man a heart attack.
I did. But, as my father, I get even for some of the things he's done to me.
Of course. Right. That's funny.
So it doesn't mean anything other than you've been selected for part of your return to be examined. And if it's a red flag, hopefully you've been smart enough to paper it because you know that it's unusual. You had something strange happen. You had a flood, you had a fire, you had employee stealing from you, whatever. And so you have something that's unusual and you've papered that effectively. And if they come in and they look at that and you've papered it effectively, they go, okay, thank you much. If they come in and say, let's say you had a lot of credit cards and they think it was too much for your particular business. And so they start going through the credit card bills. And they say, what's this? And you show them exactly what the business purpose is. They say, what's this? You show them the business purpose. They say, what's this? And after about 6 of those, they're done. Now, if they find personal stuff in there that they have to take out, they're going to look deeper. They need some more, and they're going to go through every item.
Right.
So do it the right way. Be upfront. Pay your taxes the way you're required to pay them, the way your CPA teaches you to organize your books and do them, and you're fine. There's nothing to worry about. Now, if you cheat on taxes and you get audited, expect the worst.
Right.
Because you're going to get it.
Now,
but that's because you cheat.
Going into that meeting, dealing with the IRS, is there a reason to think that they're not flexible, that they wouldn't be flexible in the sense that, not that they're going to bend the rules for you, but flexible in the sense that, you have the ability to not be perfect and it's okay. And they're going to kind of help you get through it. Or I think that's, part of the fear of the IRS is the fear of the unknown and their ability to put your head on the pike. And
they have discretion. I don't ever advise that a taxpayer meet with the IRS. Use a CPA. Use a CPA that does these things. They're familiar with the audit. They may know the auditor. They know the procedures. They know the rules. In many cases, I know the rules better than the IRS examiner does. Okay. Yes, and I'm not emotionally involved in it. So when he says, and he gets nasty about something, I'm not emotionally involved, and I can do it professionally and work through it professionally. And I know when he gets out of line, I can bring him back in or ask for his supervisor or say, we're going to go to appeals with this. I've got all kinds of tools in my toolbox that you as a taxpayer don't have. Now, what brought this home to me really, really big was recently the IRS screwed up on my taxes. So I called them. And I found myself yelling at this revenue officer over the phone and telling him he's a worthless piece of cow dung, and he doesn't know what he's doing, and he's violated his own Internal Revenue Service manual, which he had, and he's violating the law, which he did. And I'm requiring him to do this, this, and this, which he didn't do. And to get even, he went even further after the conversation. Well, it took me a couple of weeks to get a hold of his boss and so on. But as I'm on the phone talking to him, I'm going, Charles, don't do this. Don't talk like that. Don't yell at him. You're not doing any good. Right. And I wasn't. And he went off and did stupider things because he was pissed at me afterwards.
Right.
One day, and this is a perfect example, I was talking to a tax agent in New York for a client. And she and I, it was morning, she and I spent probably half an hour talking mostly about grandkids before we ever got down to business. Right. Now, she has some discretion. After we spent a half an hour and I'm learning all about her grandkids and she's learning about mine, and we now talk about business, she has some discretion. Do you think she was more inclined to use that discretion in my favor or against me? Now, I don't say I made her do it, but she had a better feeling toward me and therefore my client than she would have if, like the agent here in Fort Worth, I'd been yelling at her.
It is amazing how much subjectivity that, it's funny. I had a conversation with someone in finance about funding a business, and we talked about getting a loan for a business. And what I told her was, when I understood the process of getting a business loan, I realized how much of it is actually subjective. And, there are a few objective measures that they look at, but the majority of getting, capital, working capital or funding capital is subjective to the bank, all Absolutely. On the discretion of the person for whom you're trying to convince that, that's really what it is, convincing this person that you're worthy of a loan. So I'm not surprised at all that these individuals that are working for the IRS have this power of subjectivity when it comes to how they choose to rule or how they do that. And of course, you broke your first rule. You went off on the guy.
I did. I broke my own rule. I shouldn't have talked to him. I should have my ex-partner talk to him or somebody. Yeah. But it was a disaster.
So, yeah, go ahead.
No. So don't talk to the IRS. Let a professional do it for you. They're much more likely to get what you need from them because they know the rules of the game. When I grew up, Pele was the world's best soccer player, maybe of all times. Great athlete. But if you took Pele and you put him at second base at Yankee Stadium, he'd be totally lost. Doesn't know the rules, doesn't know the field, doesn't know the players, doesn't know the equipment. He'd be lost. Still be a great athlete.
Right.
So if you have a businessman, a chef, a lawyer, a manufacturer, a mechanic, a dog groomer, whatever, that's great at their job, at their business, they know their business, they're experts at it, or they'd be out of business.
Right.
But you take them and stick them at second base in a New York Yankees uniform, they're lost. And that's what happens when you send them to the IRS. They don't know the rules. They don't know the players. They don't know how the game is played. And they're going to have a lot of problems because of that. And I really recommend a professional.
Is this fundamentally the issue when it comes to, obviously it comes down to, I think, you don't know what you don't know. But here's the thing. You have buckets of expertise, right? So you have tax preparers, you have certified public accountants. Not every tax preparer is a certified public accountant.
No. Absolutely not.
But certified public accountants could almost always be tax preparers, and it's like one of those things where small business owners or entrepreneurs think that they go to this for instance, you go to H&R Block, not to call out a name of a specific business, but you're sitting in front of someone who had a couple weeks training on their software, but the software is doing all the heavy lifting, and they could be missing out on tax strategies that could actually save you money and keeping you from getting audited. And how does a small business owner, or what are some questions that a small business owner or entrepreneur should be asking the person who's going to prepare their taxes to avoid getting someone with as little domain experience as possible, or even thinking that a person's more qualified than they actually are to do this?
First of all, if they're a CPA, their certificate should be on the wall and they have a license, licensed by the state they're in, or multiple states. But ask them, how many businesses like mine do you prepare taxes for? How long have you been preparing taxes for these types of businesses? What are some of the things that you think I can save taxes by doing? What are some of the techniques I should be thinking about in my business? And if they can go through those fairly with ease and give you examples and give you things, I do another 10 or 12 businesses like yours out of my 150 clients that I handle. And I've been doing them for a number of years. In fact, Joe over there across town, you probably know him. I do his. Well, all of a sudden you have some confidence. Get some references. Call them and say, hey, Charlie says he does your taxes. Does he do a good job? No, I wouldn't trust the son of a bitch farther than I could throw him. Well, okay, don't use him then.
Right.
But those are the kind of things. Ask them for references, ask them for experience, ask them for knowledge, ask them for ideas. And if they can give you all of those, then they may be a good mix. Also, you have to like them.
Mm-hmm.
If you won't talk to them and they won't talk to you, don't use them.
Yeah.
If you're not comfortable with them, don't use them. Use somebody else.
Almost every CPA that I've spoken to has a tax strategy, or they've come up with a way that they actually develop or educate a person or client that they're working with. Why do you think that there's this like cognitive dissonance between small business owners and doing things the right way with taxes?
Well, doing things the right way seems like it's very expensive. And, if you fudge on your taxes, you can save some money. I don't recommend it, because when you get caught, what you saved is a pittance to what it'll cost you. But, none of us like to pay taxes.
Right.
It's expensive. And, when we see where it goes, so much of it goes to waste.
You're not kidding about that.
Exactly. The $3.5 trillion thing they have now, for including the new Green Deal and woke whatever, it's enough to make a conservative just, scream. So, it's not pleasant to pay those taxes for things you don't believe in. Right. And that's no matter what side of the political equation you are, there's things you don't agree with.
Right.
So there's liberals that don't agree with some things, and there's conservatives that don't agree. Anyway, so, but you have to develop the mindset that this is the law and this is what you need to do, and do it the right way. You don't want to, because it's expensive and it's time consuming, and it's like in payroll. Well, right. I'll just pay them under the table. That's fine until one of them goes down and files for unemployment.
That's right.
And the auditor comes out and you're screwed. Yep. So, you got to follow the law. If you don't want to, okay, that's fine. But when you get caught, don't cry on my shoulder.
It's funny, because there are business owners that out there, they start and they have these employees, what they say, I'm going to hire employees, but I'm going to hire them as an independent contractor. And, they're wearing the uniform, they give them the scripts to follow, they do all this other stuff. And I think it's funny, because what people don't realize is that you don't have to, the person doesn't have to complain about you as a business owner, forcing you to get caught by the IRS. The IRS just has to observe that you're treating your independent contractors as if they are employees.
Right.
and then they could hammer you on that.
They're going to hammer you big time. Misclassification is one of the big problems. The Labor Department estimates that 70% of all businesses miscalculate workers, either independent contractors versus employees, or overtime versus non-overtime. And they look at this stuff all the time. And if you have too much, if you're a type of business that wouldn't have independent contractors,
right,
and on that tax return you show a lot of contract labor, that's a red flag.
Interesting.
And that one is going to cost you big time. There's
now,
more things.
Does that start with an audit?
It may start with an audit. It may start with the Labor Department sending out an auditor. It may start with the state unemployment people sending out an auditor.
Right.
You will get audited by your state unemployment people. It's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when.
Right.
Because they're local and they have a local office and they're auditing every business.
Yep.
They will come out and audit your books. And if they find independent contractors that should be employees, not only will they want that, but they report it to the Internal Revenue Service as well.
Oh man, it's funny, and they have a lot fewer businesses to monitor than the IRS. So
absolutely,
they can and they will do it.
You can figure now in Texas, you can figure about every 7 to 8, 9 years, you're going to get an unemployment audit. That's just life. I get one. I think we've had 3 or 4 in our 30 years, and it's going to happen. Also, if you get a sales tax audit, they may look at the rest of the books, see the contract labor, and call the unemployment people and say, hey, you need to come audit these people. They all work together.
Yeah, right. Oh, they have the biggest incentive in the world to try to pull money from you. And the funny thing is that once it's like that door you don't want to open, because once that hand is there, you're always kind of on the radar with them.
Yeah, that's the thing about the red flag. They come in and they look at the red flag, but they're going to look at everything else a little bit. And if they see something else that's a little out of sort, they'll want to look at that a little more and a little more and a little more. And all of a sudden you're in the midst of a full scale, pull down your pants and show your warts audit, and anything you've done, you're going to lose.
Yeah, that's funny. So what are the penalties for misclassifying 1099 independent contractor when they should be W-2?
Well, it's all the taxes that they should have paid and you should have paid. So all the withholding, all the FICA taxes that you didn't pay in, you now owe, plus penalties, plus interest. Okay. Now in 27 states, you have to report independent contractors as new hires, and people don't do that. And if you get caught on that, you have to pay all the child support you didn't withhold.
So you're paying for someone else's
you're raising his kid.
Relationship stuff that's going on there. That is amazing. And do you think that a lot of businesses don't know that they have to register 1099s as new hires?
Most of them don't. The states are not publicizing it big. It came up to my attention a few years ago. All my clients know about it, of course.
Right.
Because we communicate with our clients literally several times a month on things that are happening, changes, things they need to be aware of. Right. Things like the child support, which Texas is one of those states. 45S, which allows you to pay people for time off.
Yeah.
And if it meets certain classifications that would otherwise be FMLA, you can get a tax credit for what you pay them. So all my employers are now tracking that in the payroll system. And at the end of the year, they give it to their CPA and they get a tax credit for up to 25% of those wages. These are things that your payroll company should be advising you on. If you're doing payroll by yourself, you don't know them, and you don't know what you don't know, and the rules change constantly. Independent contractors. There was a new rule that had been promulgated by the Trump administration that was supposed to go into effect the 8th of May. I'm sorry, the 8th of March this year. On the 7th of March, it was canceled by the Biden administration. They're issuing different rules. So things change. Things change. The last 12 years particularly have been 13 now, have had a lot of changes in payroll and payroll law and payroll procedures and payroll forms. And, I get several newsletters a week from the Internal Revenue Service, plus all the states. And if you don't keep up with those things, you're going to screw up.
You know,
That's
I live in Massachusetts. You don't have to feel bad for me, but I do. And Taxachusetts, it should be called. It's called. But fortunately, I have a payroll company, much like yourself, who are on it. And however, they're getting the same correspondence about my business because I've connected them to my third party thing. And you can talk about that later if you like. That I get. And so when I get a letter, which I did from the Department of Unemployment saying, oh, by the way, your rate is going up for unemployment this year. And then they sent another letter 2 weeks later. We changed our mind. We're not going to put the rate up right now. Then I get another letter said we changed our mind about changing our mind. And we're going to split the difference from where we were going to go to where we were. And then it will be like half of that. And so when you say that things are constantly changing, you're so right. And they can change within a month. And they can issue something that they just retract because someone changed their mind.
Well, on the PPP, they were literally issuing new regulations and changes 3 or 4 times a week.
Wow.
For months.
Wow.
On that. And the thing's just, it's an ever-changing thing. COVID really screwed up the unemployment because obviously they paid out huge sums of money for unemployment. Now they have to recoup it one way or another, whether it should be on the people that used it or on everybody, or frankly, in Texas, they're taking part of the CARES Act money and funding the unemployment fund for all the employers in Texas, about $7.4 billion. Wow. So every state's different. I've seen increases as much as 500% on some things on unemployment. Other states have, like Texas, has tried to keep it funded a different way so it doesn't affect the employers.
Yeah. I'm not sure why people think that money is like metal, right? It's always in the environment. It's just in the environment somewhere, right? Mm-hmm. So you pump all this money into the economy, into unemployment. In order for things for people to get square again, they have to get money from somewhere. So it's not like these things just go unheard of or blind, and people like, oh, it's $2 trillion. Don't worry about it because that money is just not gonna, that money is not gonna, I'm not gonna feel that money. Like I'm not paying the 2 trillion. So they think, so like, just go ahead and do it. But that money has to come from somewhere.
$3.5 trillion, zero cost. Yeah, right. I have got a bridge I want to sell you in New York. Okay.
That's like gaining the weight, but not eating the food.
No calorie food, no calorie ice cream.
Can't have it both ways. That money has to come and go from somewhere. So, okay. So we talked about a lot of different things, but let's go back to the unemployment thing and the local states kind of just doing this audit. I remember I got a soft audit. I don't think it was a full audit, but maybe it was. It came from the audit division, and it was just because, for instance, and it could be the weirdest thing, they wanted me to prove I had kids. And so I had to send bank statements and stuff to prove I had kids, and I was thinking to myself, what does my bank statements have to do with my kids? But clearly, they were looking at both my tax return, my bank statements, and the fact that I had kids. And fortunately for me, I've always, hired a professional to do everything for most of my professional life. But if I didn't, I could have been screwed there because they could have said, well, we noticed this, right? I feel like this is the gateway drug to them going ham on me later.
Exactly. The only time I've been personally audited, I was still in the United States Marine Corps. I'd married my wife, and she had 5 children when I married her. So I got them all set up as dependents for dependent care and other things. That was all legal. And I filed my tax return married with 5 children. The previous year, I'd filed a single. So I got an audit notice, and I was in Kansas City, and the IRS shared a building with the Marine Corps. Marine Corps Automated Service Center was on this side, and IRS was over on this side. So bright and early one morning, I walked out of the front, walked down the sidewalk, walked back in. Explained to the receptionist, I wasn't a CPA, I was a sergeant in the Marine Corps, okay?
Right.
High school education. Scared the hell out of me. Got the examiner, and he said, you know, why we asked to audit you? And I said, I got a pretty good idea. And I handed him this folder and it had all the proof in it. And he took the folder and he started going through it, went through everything, made some notes, made some more notes, put it all back in the folder, handed it back to me. And he said, son, you got more problems than me. Have a good day.
He wasn't lying. You probably should have asked to get audited instead. No, but
I should have offered him some of the kids, but you know.
Yeah, no, exactly. You know, so it's funny because it's true that there are these little times, there are these moments in time when you're dealing with the IRS that you have to be 100%. And I feel like if you come to them and you're well prepared, they tend to just, they kind of silently come in and then they silently go off. And
again, if they come in and it's an order, the first dozen things they look at are perfect, they're done.
Yeah.
They don't, they have, it comes from being a CPA. It's a level of confidence that if they take a sample of so many items and they're all perfect, well, then they're probably mostly all perfect and not worth their effort to go further. This is something you learn in auditing as a CPA, and they use it. So they take a statistical sample and check it. And if that sample's great, they're done. Yeah. So if you've got everything perfect, the audits are quick, simple, and easy. Yeah. If you don't, they get more and more complex because they really start looking for stuff.
Yeah. So that's a good lesson for people who are listening to this podcast or watching this on YouTube, because we're going to simulcast this, to know, which is that to have your books in order. Frankly, it doesn't cost that much to get a good bookkeeper to keep you categorized in the right places.
Absolutely not. And your CPA or your bookkeeper, if you ask them, they will tell you how to keep your books.
Yeah.
They'll show you how to make yourself audit proof.
Yeah.
Because it's the paperwork. Technically, if you have a deduction, you've spent some money for something that's deductible, you can take that as a deduction. Yeah. Even if you can't prove it. Mm-hmm. It's legal to deduct it. It's legal to take it off your taxes. It's absolutely permissible. But if you get audited and you can't prove it, then they may well disallow it. Yeah. Even though it is legitimate, if you can't prove it to the auditor, they'll disallow it. So if you're deducting whatever material on a job and you lose that receipt, that money is still deductible. Mm-hmm. Just understand, if you get audited, you may lose it.
Yeah, absolutely. And nowadays it's fairly easy to get your receipts back than it was before. After you do most transactions now, you get an email receipt, right? So these companies have archived records and they can probably send you a receipt. So it shouldn't be that hard. I keep a separate credit card. Now, since I'm a small business, they're not going to give me a corporate card that the corporation's responsible for. It's in my name. Right.
Okay.
Sure.
But it's a separate card and I only put business expenses on there.
Right.
So if they audit that, they will only find business expenses. They will never find personal expenses. I'm extraordinarily careful about that for exactly an audit reason. Mm-hmm. They can go through that in a fine-tooth comb and they're not going to find anything to throw up a red flag. So I carry, 2 credit cards in my wallet, one for business, one for personal, and I never mix them. I like to pay everything by check or credit card, so I have a record of it. I don't use cash in the business because then you have to get a receipt and track it and so on. So I paper everything with credit cards or checks.
Smart.
It just makes life easy. And credit cards, man, you can go back years and pull the statements from the credit card company.
Yeah. Let's talk about financial reports, because this is something I find that is so critical for small businesses and entrepreneurs to know about, but very few of them do. They often find out about it when they want to either get a loan or try to sell their business. And someone's looking at their Ebitda and they're like, what the heck is Ebitda? And how does that affect my life? What would you say are the top financial reports that business owners should know about?
Well, you have to have a balance sheet and income statement for sure. A cash flow statement's nice, but it's not required. but the balance sheet and income statement, the bank will want to see both of them. The balance sheet obviously is your assets and liabilities, what you own and what you owe. The income statement is your flow of income. It's your revenue less your expenses to your net income. That tells them how much you're making. The balance sheet tells them how much you're worth.
Right.
Okay.
And can we just say that another name for income statement, of course, is profit and loss.
P&L statement. Absolutely. Sorry, it's accountants.
Exactly. Sorry. Go ahead. Continue.
So your P&L, and the P&L can consist of the income statement and the balance sheet. So in some
right.
Some people view it as both.
Mhm.
So those things you have to have. Your bookkeeper, your CPA can produce those for you, and he should go through them with you and show you what they mean and show you where you're making money, where you're losing money, where your assets are, explain depreciation, explain what's taxable and not taxable, what's deductible and not deductible. You should understand your statements because they're really a record of what you've done.
Mm-hmm.
And we all tend to get real close to our business and we see the money flowing and so on. But it's hard for us at some point just to summarize it in our mind. Are we really making money? Or are we really not? And that's what the financial statement will do. And properly designed, it will show you where you're making money. And you can use it to say, okay, this piece of my business is not making money. I need to get rid of it. This piece is making great money. I need to grow it.
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing that a good set of P&Ls, a good income statement and balance sheet can help you determine. You can make decisions from them on your business because you now have knowledge that you can't get just from writing the checks.
You know, it's funny. I was listening to Warren Buffett one time just talk about how he invests. He says, I look at basically two things. I look at the management, the structure of the management, who they are, basically who's running the company, and I look at their financials, right? And I was thinking, as a small business owner and entrepreneur, when you're making a lot of money or you're earning revenue, you should be investing as along the way as you go. And so there's no better way to choose a stock than to pull a company's financial records to actually see how they're doing. And I feel like they're required by the SEC to publish their financial records, but nobody knows how to read them except for institutional investors. And so you have Joe Schmo. I mean, and don't get me wrong, I think it's cool that we have the new fintech companies with Cash App and Robinhood and these things where you can easily invest in stocks and bonds and things like that. However, most people make a decision about a company based on the news cycle.
Right.
And you don't know who's controlling the narrative there.
Mike, I started doing security analysis when I was 14 years old.
Wow.
And I've been following Warren for 50 years. And I followed his mentor before that. So I fully understand where you're at. And I've been looking at balance sheets and income statements from publicly held companies for more than 50 years. And so I know but I'll be honest, I don't have time to do it anymore. I haven't had for years.
Right.
I have an investment advisor.
Yep.
And he handles my money, and he does the research and looks it up and so on, because I don't have the time anymore. But yeah, if you're going to invest, doing it off the news cycle is a terrible, terrible way to invest. Oh, and the next worst one. Oh, hey, Micah, this stock I got over here. You really ought to buy some. Okay.
The guy that walks his French poodle by your house every day that has the stock tips, right?
You know, your drinking buddy, your neighbor next door, the taxi cab driver. You know, they all got a tip, and that's the best way I know of to go broke.
That is so true. You know, because the thing is, once you learn how to read a balance sheet and a profit and loss or income statement, you then can couple that with the news. And then see if the news actually makes sense to you. Yes. Because they release it by quarters, you can see how the last quarter went, and you can make a determinant factor about how you want to move forward. And to your point, once you get to I'm gonna call you the big Reid status. Once you get to big Reid status over there, then you have somebody do all the work for you. But like, I'm small potatoes, so I probably enjoy the process a little bit too. I kind of nerd out on that a little bit. I have something to show you though right here. This is what you were talking about. If you're listening to this, I'm holding up a book. The Benjamin Graham, that was Warren
Absolutely.
Buffett's mentor.
That's
right
Warren
there.
Buffett's mentor.
Yeah. And that book it's admittedly not easy to read.
There's worse.
You have to have interest in investors, I can imagine. So, but so let's talk tax strategy, because tax strategy is another thing that small business owners and entrepreneurs kind of trip up on. What are the biggest things that small business owners, in your mind, in your experience, what you've noticed, that they could get as tax deductions, or they could claim, or they don't know about, and they just kind of drop the ball on it because they're not tracking it, because they don't have a bookkeeper or whatnot?
One of the big things is tax credits for employment, for COVID things in the current situation. The employee retention credit is a huge thing.
Yeah.
Some of my clients have literally gotten hundreds of thousands of dollars of tax credits for that.
Even if they've gotten PPP, right?
Even if they got a PPP, it doesn't matter. You can have both.
Right.
And people missed out on the PPP because they didn't get into it. They didn't think it applied to them. There was multiple rounds of it.
Mhm.
But the employment retention credit, the COVID credits, the 45S, there's other things. That's where they're missing, because these things aren't in, you're not going to see them on CBS News.
Yeah.
Okay. You may hear about the PPP, but the employment retention credit, you'll never understand it from the mainstream media. You've got to have somebody, either you've got to dig into it and be getting the trades and understand it, or you have to have somebody that can explain it to you and say, hey, Micah, for your business, you need to look at this. I think we can save you some money.
Yeah.
Have you applied for this? Have you done that? Oh, by the way, if you'll track this, we can get a credit here. Do you have people in this part of town? Have you hired ex-felons? Have you hired ex-military? Look at your people, and these are the things you need to ask when you hire them. Some of them you have to do immediately, and some you can do later.
Mhm.
But if you don't have somebody advising you on these, a lot of them you're never going to know unless you're a wonk, a tax wonk.
Right.
And if you're running a business, you're probably not a tax wonk as well.
Yeah, I realize that not most people don't nerd out. Like, I kind of nerd out on this stuff, but honestly, it's true. Like, I'm getting, so I got both rounds of PPP. I got second draw and I got the first draw, and I still am getting thousands of dollars. So my payroll company just contacted me the other day because they were like, hey, do you want us to run an ERC for the quarters that you didn't get the PPP? And I was like, yeah. And you can still go back to 2020. Yep. And so I'm getting thousands of dollars in tax credits.
Yep.
That if I had not asked, I wouldn't. And I want to harp on something that you said. You said that most people believe that things are so expensive, therefore they don't do it. But they don't actually, in my mind, think about the realized cost of, or associate the cost with either savings or credits, and how that weighs against what they're actually paying for.
We find that in many cases for our clients, our services are free. We save them more money. We provide them with more credits. We solve more problems. The IRS in fiscal 19 issued $13 billion in employment tax penalties.
Wow.
Over half were abated, reversed, gotten rid of by people like me that knew what they were doing because they were in error. The IRS is 100,000 people, all civil servants. So they're not necessarily as motivated as us for-profit people are. And they're using technology, some of which goes back to the 1960s.
That is stunning.
It is. It's frightening. And so there are lots of errors that are created. Systems don't talk to each other. There's still a lot of things are entered by paper. I had one client, he'd send in 2 tax returns together, which is a mistake. They stapled them together and only gave him credit for the top one.
Wow.
And by the time he got around to it and it got to me, it was too late to appeal. and he had to pay that additional tax return that he'd already taken care of. He got no credit for it. Those things happen. So, it's, you got to be on top of these things. You just can't let them go.
That's true. I wanted to mention actually that we've been talking everything else in the world is the proposed tax on unrealized gains. Is this just a massive weed smoking session or something in the federal government? Like, what is up with that? What do you think?
A few years ago, they did a mark to market for certain securities, and it was a nightmare, and they killed it. But if they go on unrealized, okay, I've got a stock that's gone from $1,000 to $100,000. I've got $99,000 of income I have to pay tax on. Where am I getting the tax money from?
I know.
I'm sorry. What are you going to force me to sell it?
Yeah.
That's the whole thing with family farms and small businesses being inherited.
Right.
All of a sudden you inherit $2 million of Iowa farmland like my family has. I don't have it, but they do.
Right.
My grandmother's brothers. Okay. And it goes to one of my cousins, and he's got to sell the land to pay the taxes. Come on. What the hell kind of business is that? And this is the same thing with mark to market or unrealized gains. They're unrealized gains because they're not realized.
That's
the
right.
other thing that's a killer is my mother had Hawaiian Sugar, which was bought up 2 or 3 times, ended up being Sara Lee.
Yep.
And she'd inherited from her mother, and it was like 70 years. Well, she'd held it for 70 years. And so it's worth 50 times what she paid for it.
Right.
But the dollar is a 50th of what it was then. So she really has no gain. Okay.
Right.
But yeah, she's got to pay taxes on all this illusionary gain. Come on.
The only thing I can think of is that this is a massive ploy to get people to buy gold and silver again, which won't even cover the amount that they printed in the last year. But the other thing too is what happens to all those stocks that people have to sell to pay the capital gains? It gets flooded back in the stock market, and the stock market tanks because the supply is not there. I mean, the supply is there, but the demand's certainly not going to be there.
What you have to remember is Congress only has one thing to sell to get campaign contributions. That's tax breaks. So they sell those, and then they want the other thing. 2 things they have is projects in the district. Well, you got to have money to do that. So if we can raise money from the rich and give it to our people in our district that don't have investments, that don't care about that, well, we'll get votes. And these people are pissed. Well, we don't care about them. They're just a small percentage. So, we're gonna steal from people to give to other people to buy votes. That's Congress. How do you think they get rich?
Right.
I mean, our congressional delegations, they're very rich people for the most part. And a lot of them got rich. Nancy Pelosi and her husband are worth, according to the recent news, $300 million.
Wow.
They weren't worth $1 million when she started.
On $140,000 congressional salary.
Well, it was a company, and I've forgotten now. Oh, Visa. When Visa went public, Nancy Pelosi and her husband got cut in for the IPO to a tune of several $1 million worth, which immediately doubled.
Wow.
And of course, there was legislation in Congress that would hurt Visa. Well, it never made it out of committee.
Well, it's good work if you can get it.
I'm sorry. I have a hard time telling one person this morning one thing and telling somebody else the exact opposite in the afternoon, and then going home and in the morning shaving. Okay. Right. So I'll never make a good politician.
That's
the only elected office I went for was city council in my little town of 3,000 people, and I didn't get elected. So
that's funny.
And the ex-mayor afterwards said to me, congratulations on losing. You don't really want the job.
No, I can't imagine. So small business owners, when they're considering when is it time to start payroll? This is a common question that I get asked when I do consulting work.
If you've incorporated or you set up an LLC that you're going to file as a S corp, day one, because you're an employee.
Right.
The next time is if you're a sole proprietor or you're a partnership, the moment you hire one person, you need to use a payroll service. It's not worth your time, trouble, energy, or effort to do it and learn it to do it internally. It's just not worth it.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking a pittance, and you don't have to pay them. You don't have to move the money. You don't have to deposit it and forget to deposit and get penalized.
Yep.
And you don't have to file the forms. You don't have to know which forms to file. You don't know when to file them, where to file them, what state to file them with. I'll tell you what numbers you need to get. You need to go to the state revenue department. You need to go to state unemployment department. You need to file your SS4. Get me these numbers so we can file your taxes for you. And we'll take care of all that.
Yeah.
Why would you want to become an expert at payroll when you got a business to run?
Right.
You outsource. I don't sew my own clothes. I don't build my own car. I don't even mow my own lawn. Okay.
Come on, Chuck.
Not anymore. So when I was poor, I did, but I can make more money if the time I spend mowing the lawn, and it's work as far as I'm concerned. I can come into the office, do a tax return, and I can pay for, a summer's worth of mowing.
Right.
Okay. So I use my time where it makes me the most money, and mowing lawns are not one of them.
Larry Bird used to cut his own grass.
Yeah, well, I didn't get Larry's Bird salary either for playing a kid's game. So, okay.
Actually, you probably make more than Larry Bird did when he first came into the NBA. Those salaries are really, really low.
They're not now.
No, certainly not.
So, outsource the things that aren't main to your business. Don't outsource your business, but outsource the things that are just ancillary. They have to be done.
Right.
The bookkeeping. You need a banker. You need an accountant, preferably a CPA.
Yep.
You need a lawyer, and you need an insurance agent.
Absolutely.
Those four things, those four people you need when you go into business. If you don't have them, get them, because the banker, you run all your money through him. You need to know him. And if you have a good relationship with him, when you want to borrow money, it's easier.
Yep.
Your attorney can advise you on the risks.
Yep.
Now be careful, because he'll want to tell you how to run your business. Just take his advice and then make your own business decisions. The CPA will keep you on track, keep your taxes on track, keep your financials on track, keep you from having audit problems, and your insurance agent will protect your liabilities from those liabilities with insurance that'll keep you from going out of business if somebody slips and falls on the step out front or whatever.
Yeah.
So those four people you need in a new business. They're not cheap.
Yeah.
You can minimize some of that cost by how you use them, but unless you want to be an accountant, an attorney, an insurance agent, and own a bank, you got to have them.
I also want to just add to that. When you're considering payroll companies, they are not all equal. And I'll tell you why. I switched from basically you can call it a fintech payroll company. It's one of those online companies. I'll spare the name. And, for basic things, they were great. But there were things that they didn't tell you that I understood once I actually obtained a local payroll company.
Yep.
And I realized that the level of competence and abilities were vastly different. And I didn't even know that I had a tax credit with the Massachusetts Department of Revenue. And it had been sitting there for a year. And the other payroll company didn't tell me. I was working with this payroll company. I switched over, and they go, you have a tax credit just sitting there. I'm like, do you think that the Massachusetts Department of Revenue were gonna knock on my door and say, hey, look, we're gonna send you a wire for this money that you have that you overpaid? No way.
So you've just basically stated our unique selling proposition. We're compliance experts. I'm a CPA. I'm a U.S. Tax Court Practitioner, which allows me to represent my clients in tax court without being an attorney and without charging like an attorney. I take a 2848 power of attorney with the Internal Revenue Service, which means I get a copy of every piece of correspondence, and I can respond to them sometimes before you even know something's happened. I can protect my clients. I can solve their problems. I can take a power of attorney with the states as well and interface with that. And we solve all those problems. We guarantee our services as well, but we provide a level of compliance expertise that our competitors, for the most part, don't. The major corporations, one of them, our major competitor, I won't call their name, but their initials are ADP. You call and say, hey, I need to talk to a CPA about a payroll tax problem. They'll tell you to call your own.
Wow.
They don't have them available for you.
Right.
They have technicians who handle their software. All of our major competitors are that way. In fact, the vast majority of our competitors, period, are that way. They don't have professionals on staff, CPAs, let alone the U.S. Tax Court practitioners that can solve those problems for you. And you have to go to somebody. You go to your CPA. If he was a real payroll expert, he'd be doing your payroll.
Right.
So you're going to have to pay him to learn what's going on. And he's probably going to do, if he does it, it's going to be expensive if he can do it.
Right.
Instead of using somebody that makes a living doing it.
Right. Yeah, no, exactly. I think the biggest takeaway from this podcast today is, when you hire competent help, you get competent results, and you end up not screwing yourself in the long run, and this is really one of those things in business that you don't want to mess up. I mean, there's a lot of lessons that you can learn in business and recover from, and it's okay. And dealing with the IRS and taxes and the states and all the paperwork and all that stuff is not one of those things you don't want to get right, because it only costs you. It almost never does it go the other way. Right. And benefit you. It almost always costs you something. It's always time. It's always money. And, catching up when you're years down the road can spell the end of your business.
Yes. And it happens, and it's put numerous companies out of business. Yes.
It's that misclassification one is a big one. I heard someone that owed something like $160,000 in back taxes and interest and penalties and all that other stuff. And they are not shy with the penalties and interest. That's for sure.
No, they're not.
So, well, Charles, how do people get in contact with you if they want to learn more about Get Payroll? They want to advise with you, and they want to just kind of, recruit your expertise on their team.
Well, getpayroll.com is the website. My email is cjr@getpayroll. And my newest book is the Payroll Book, a guide for small businesses and startups. And Micah, for your listeners, if they'd like a copy of this, if they'll go to the payrollbook.com website, enter the discount code podcast, we will ship them a free copy, no shipping, no handling, just for them.
Awesome. That's great. Thank you for that.
It's 30 years of experience distilled down to 95,000 words.
Wow. Now we have listeners in 15 different countries. So are we shipping to Italy?
We will, but it's U.S. payroll.
Okay. All right. So if you're listening to this,
we handle some U.S. subsidiaries for foreign companies.
Oh, cool. That's awesome. So there you go, folks. If you're listening to this podcast or watching on YouTube, then that link to thepayrollbook.com will be in the description, and you'll be able to click right from either the YouTube or the audio version of the podcast description. It's www.thepayrollbook.com. Enter in podcast into the discount code, get your free book, get your free shipping. There is no reason for you not to get a free resource, and I love the free resources. I'm going to do it myself. I got to support Charles and let everybody know when it's come. So once you get your book, make sure you tag the Common Sense Podcast on Instagram or tag us on Twitter or Facebook and let us know. Take a picture of you with the book so that we can see that you got it, and we'll send it to Get Payroll, and we'll let Charles see the support that he got. Charles, thank you so much for coming on today and really talking common sense to the individuals listening to the podcast, or watching. And this stuff that you mentioned today is so important, and it's just not known. And it's so important to get this fundamental, like these are just the basics. We didn't even go into like the more complicated strategies surrounding the stuff that we talked about, but these are the fundamentals. What do they call it?
It's been my pleasure, Micah.
Absolutely. So you got to start with the football coaches. What do they say? You start with blocking and tackling first before you learn anything else. And this is simple blocking and tackling in order to put yourself on the right foot. So thank you for that. All right, folks, if you're listening to this podcast or you're watching, thank you for tuning in today. Don't forget to subscribe. If you're on YouTube, hit the notification bell so you can get more updates when we have more experts on, like Charles, so that it can come right to your inbox. And then if you're listening to this on podcasts, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcast, don't forget to subscribe. Use your common sense in your business, and your business will grow. Until the next time, talk to you later.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of The Common Sense Show, hosted by Micah Logan. The producer for The Common Sense Show is Paul Logan. To reach out to Micah and The Common Sense Show, talk to us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search The Common Sense Show. And if you enjoy the show, please don't forget to rate and or review us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Thank you for listening.